My name is Max, and I had to share this story with someone. It was a Friday night, and my parents had finally decided that I was allowed to be home without a babysitter. After all, I was 13. My mom kissed me on the forehead and handed me some money to order a pizza, while Dad lectured me for the 100th time on speed dials and saved in for the phone for emergencies. They were headed out to do their book club, like every Friday, but I knew they were going out to drink. Nobody leaves the club about a books for good for a mood. My older brother Derek was at summer camp for a week, and I couldn't wait until I was old enough to go as well. He always told me some great stories about hiking late at night, telling scary stories and sneaking off with girls to a lake. But that was still 2 years away. Anyway, after my parents left, I picked up the phone and ordered a pizza. A large deep dish with everything but mushrooms. Yuck. He told me that it wouldn't be here for a half hour, so I hung up and switched the TV to late at night. TV was always so boring. Long talk shows, fat cops making jokes, and confusing shows about doctors. After 5 minutes of suffering through channels, I decided to switch to the NES. Double Dragon 2 was in the system, and it was one of mine and Derek's favorite games. I plugged in my NES and Advantage controller and got it ready for some arcade action. But after switching to channel 3 on the television, the video was a mix-up. Random squares and pixels popped out on the screen, and the title was no longer said Double Dragon. It was more like Double Dugo. I let it aside and switched off the Nintendo Entertainment System, pulled out the cartridge and gave it a good blow. Then I opened up the door like the NES was peering into the mail slot. I inhaled, and just as I was about to blow into the system, a fat spider crawled out of it. Wham! I smashed the spider on top of the TV with my palm, and the yellow goo covering the TV in my hand. Mom's gonna love cleaning this up, I thought to myself. Wiping my hand off my jeans, I double-checked the inside the NES. It was creepy crawly free, so I blew inside the system and popped the game back in. I switched on the Nintendo, but only got a black screen. I smashed the reset button a couple of times and finally got it to work. Double Dragon 2: The Revenge. The title screen came up, but no funny picture or garbled sound. I pumped my fists up out loud and said, "Yes!" I pressed start, select player 1, and was ready to kick some ass. I'd never been able to beat this game myself. Derek was a lot better than me and knew all the secrets, but I have watched and I knew he would, and I think I learned enough to do it on my own. And besides, I had a good feeling about tonight. No parents, pizza, and have a fun game to play. As I started playing off and was off to a good start, I cleared the first 3 screens without taking one hit. It was even on my way to beating Derek's high score. I had moved on from the couch I was sitting to the floor, leaning against towards the TV, completely focused on the game when knock, knock, knock. The knocking was so loud that I jumped off the floor and dropped my joystick. As I remember, it was the pizza I ordered. I picked up the joystick and paused the game. I had taken 2 hits because of the pizza guy, so there was no way he was getting a tip now. I yelled, "Hold on!" to the closed door. As I went to the kitchen to get the money my mom had left for me. As I put my hand on the door handle, I hesitated. Dad always told me not to open the doors for strangers, and I had ordered pizza. But it wasn't the delivery man? I couldn't remember how long it had been since I ordered, and I wasn't tall enough to look for the glass on top of the door. Instead of opening the door, I asked, "Who is it?" No answer. I asked again, "Who is it?" in a louder voice this time. No answer. He must have heard me. I was about to repeat myself for the 3rd time when the stranger knocked again. Knock, knock, knock. I was startled by this, almost leaped back from the door. The only thing keeping me in place was the firm grip on the handle, which was beginning to feel slippery on my hand was sweating. Whoever this was, pizza man, stranger, or something else, they couldn't hear me. Or they could, but they weren't answering. Against my dad's lecturing, I began to turn the handle. As the door moved again, a spear of soft yellow light widened across the floor and out onto the porch light. I opened the door a few inches, and then slowly peered around to the figure on my porch. Backlit in the yellow light, its face covered in shadow, he loomed over me slowly and turned his head beginning to gaze me. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I saw the shadowy person before me. In fact, the pizza man. He wore headphones that were so loud he almost looked like the song was from where I was standing. "Hey, little dude, where's your mommy at?" he said, pushing his long hair from in front of my face. "Gone," I said. I handed him the money and for the pizza. He pulled out the box from the bag that he was carrying and handed to me. Before him, to count the money and to notice there was no tip, and said thanks, and turned away from him, closed the door with my foot. I brought the pizza box to my kitchen and opened it up. Immediately I could tell something was wrong with it, but just couldn't figure it out. I grabbed the plate from the sink and turned to the pizza. That's when I noticed it. Slowly approached the box, looked at the pizza. My stomach began to churn as I looked at it because I noticed it had mushrooms. Gross! Oh well, it still looked delicious. I piled 3 slices onto my plate and carried it to the living room where my game was still paused. I began eating the first slice and looked up at the screen. I couldn't believe that stupid pizza man made me took 2 hits. I've been doing so good, I might as well be able to beat my brother's score. After finishing the slice, I grabbed my joystick and unpaused the game. There was only one enemy on screen, so I went to give him an old flying knee to finish off the level. When I noticed it wasn't an enemy, it was Jimmy. He's the character you played on the second controller. I figured the game had glitched, but I wasn't about to reset it now. It took so long to get it to work, and I was doing better than I ever have. I tried moving left and right, but Jimmy wouldn't move. The character just sat there. I tried punching and kicking him, but nothing happened. I was determined not to reset the NES, but instead I plugged in the second controller, pressed the buttons on the Player 2 gamepad, but Jimmy wouldn't punch, move, or anything. I grabbed my advantage and tried to move on the right side of the stage. "Come on!" I yelled, completely frustrated with the game bugging out when I was doing so, and the Jimmy character began to walk right to the screen. I stared at the screen, baffled, mouth agape. Did Jimmy just listen to me? As Jimmy reached for the edge of the screen I was on, the game continued. We were at the next area, and enemies were closing in on us. I jumped into action, fighting off the enemies from the right side of the screen. When I finished off the last one, I looked over astonished to what I was seeing. Jimmy was finishing off the enemies to the left. He was doing so much better than me as he jumped over their heads, landed on his knees, and felt like it was nothing. I cheered him on, and that was the last enemy on the screen cleared. We both moved on to the right. I wasn't so sure if the game had glitched or taken over the second player or whatnot, but I wasn't going to argue. We were doing great. The character Jimmy was so good I was able to set my controller down to eat, as he would finish off everyone before that came after me. We fought off countless waves and eventually came to the helicopter level. I hated this level because the door would open, and if you weren't careful, it would suck you right out and if you lose a life. But I had a secret. Derek would always use that secret on the level. He never told me how, but if you pause the game for exactly 10 seconds, then unpause it, the door would close, and you wouldn't have to worry about being sucked out. Time to show this Jimmy character who the master really is. The helicopter door opened and the characters began sliding towards it, ready to be sucked out into the clouds. As I was about to start performing the glitch, the game paused. Even though I hadn't noticed it myself, I tried pressing the pause button. The game remained paused and was about to press start at the other controller. The game unpaused and the helicopter door closed, and we were no longer in danger of flying out. Maybe the computer controlling Jimmy just knew about this trick too? Derek always told me that he and his friends were the ones that figured it out, and he couldn't tell me because nobody knew about it yet. I was staring at the screen while Jimmy fought off enemies, still aboard the helicopter with us. I shook off my confusion and jumped back into the fight. Me and my mastery partner were kicking ass and taking names, clearing level after level. Before long, we were at the final stage. This was it. My brother and I were never able to finish the final boss, and he always used to swear at the TV, state that the game cheated. We always got so close but could never do it. I was feeling the confident this time, rushed right in. We were doing it. Me and Jimmy weren't getting touched and dealing with loads of damage to the final boss with one final kick. I finished off the boss. I leapt to my feet and shouted, "Fuck yeah!" Good thing my parents weren't home. The credits began to roll, and I stuffed my mouth with pizza, and excited that everyone I had beaten the game, especially Derek. Man, he was going to be mad that I was able to beat it without him. I probably won't tell him about the Jimmy glitch, because he'll say it doesn't count. He's going to be so jealous. The credits ended and I was brought back to the title screen of the game. I switched off the Nintendo and then flipped back to the TV over the cable box. It was the same dumb doctor show, and a lady was crying on screen. I brought my plate into the kitchen and set it back in the sink. Just when the front door opened, it was only 9 o'clock. Too early to be my parents. I walked back to the living room and walked towards the door. It was my parents. I assumed were home early, and they didn't seem to be in a good mood as they usually were after their book club. I ran to my mother and hugged her. "You'll never believe what happened, Mom," I exclaimed. That's when I noticed she wasn't in a bad mood. She was crying. I looked to my dad, and he was staring straight with a somber look on his face. My mother knelt down beside me and placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "I love you, son," she said through her tears. I stared back at her with a puzzled look. She looked at me and then went to the kitchen. I mean, yeah, I beat Double Dragon, but there was no reason to cry. I turned my head to walk past me and towards the kitchen, while my father knelt to my side and my mom had done. I had looked at him, and this time he was looking at me in the eye. He opened his mouth to speak. Hesitant, then he closed his mouth. He opened his mouth again and spoke in a low voice, barely over a whisper. "Max, there's been an accident," he said, and it seemed to be looking around me for the right words he wanted to say. "The camp Derek is at called and..." He stopped. He didn't feel like he could finish the rest of the story. I closed my mouth, pulling his lips right over his teeth. I felt another hand on my back. It was Mom who was by my side. "Derek passed away today," Dad said, this time looking at my mother. My mother began to cry again. Shaking, I felt the grip tighten on the back of my shirt. How could Derek die? He was just a kid like me. Kids can't die. My father looked at me and very simply said, "Do you understand, son?" I stared at the NES.